stand-up like hosted by four-time Emmy-nominated producer Frank Bates and retired New York City firefighter, 9/11 first responder, and Vietnam vet, Billy O'Connor.
Today's guest, stand-up comedian Glenn Hirsch.
My brother
Frankie, how are you, pal?
Another week at the coal mine, huh?
The coal mine. Yeah. I need an agent, Frank. Get me an agent. You can do this.
Well, there's always John Boggs.
Yeah. What an agent he would be, huh?
Yep.
Of course, might be reluctant to take out a talent as great as mine.
Well, I could call him for you. Joe West, when he was on the call, Joe called me and he said, "Can you represent me?" I said, "Hell no. I don't do that anymore, but I got the guy for you."
Did you really send Cowboy Joe West to Boggs? Is
Yeah.
that right? You got him. This guy's a
Well,
man,
I sent him to John Boggs and another I sent him 2 recommendations, and I said, "Call him and see if you don't like him. If you like him, fine, pick one. If you don't like either of them, I'll give you some more names."
That's terrific. You cross the T's and dot the I's, man.
Yep.
Now who could use an old TV I got hanging around?
Derek's laughing because he's onto an inside joke that you would never get because I haven't told you recently enough.
I think I'm gonna have to bleep even that part of it.
Yeah, you might have to bleep. Well, yeah. Glenn Hirsch is our guest today. Terrific stand-up comic. Opened for Dolly Parton, Celine Dion, Kenny Loggins, Barry Manilow, The Temptations, George Benson, Frankie Valli, Jeffrey Osborne. A lot of people.
Doing it since he was 22?
22. Yeah, he'll be a great guest when we get to him.
Yeah.
But we'll get to him for a minute. So
obviously I want to pick his brain. I did a little bit of stand-up, and not like this guy. He's
what's new in your world today?
My world?
Yeah.
My world.
You just got back from New York. You saw your new grandchild?
That's great. Great to see the grandkid, the new grandchild. And see the other ones.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I get back there, a year in the life of a child is amazing. From 7 to 8 to 9, it's like, well, give me an example. My 9-year-old granddaughter, for Christmas, I asked my daughter, I says, what does Maya want for her birthday, for Christmas? She goes, she's a little tough this year. She wants a cappuccino machine. She's 9 years old. A cappuccino machine. What are you kidding me? Imagine telling your old man you were 9 years old. What do you want? I want a cappuccino machine.
He would say, "Cap this."
Cap this and put a size 10 up your ass. Here's your I got your cappuccino machine right here. I mean, it's incredible, right? A cappuccino machine. Unbelievable. 9 years old.
Did you do anything else in New York? Did you bring me back any bread?
Oh,
No.
I brought her the bread, the pizza, the bread, the bagels. It's all about that. And the push. What do they say the Italians when they push? They push the salt. You got to have the bread for the push, for the gravy. I mean, I could eat that Italian bread just 7 days straight. It's so good, so good.
It's a good deal.
Oh, it's really good. I gotta bring Derek back some bread from New York. Well, you're going to New York yourself, Derek, aren't you?
Yes, that is correct. I'm going to New York at some point, but much later than you. So
Yeah,
bring me the bread. Bring me the bread.
Bring me the bread anyway.
Because he's already back from New York.
Bring me the bread.
No, I wouldn't be back.
I'll have it sent out. Well, isn't that true that Sinatra used to get pizzas sent out from Patsy's in Harlem? He used to have in L.A., Palm Springs, he'd have 100 pizzas sent out from
I don't
Patsy's.
think that's true.
No, I heard he used to have them flied out.
Who?
Sinatra?
Sinatra used to have, there's a place in Harlem.
Let's call Tony O. Hold on, where's my?
It's 110th Street, I think.
Oh, Derek's got jokes today.
Yeah, he's got jokes. He's got jokes. He's got it all. Say it in Spanish. Come on, don't just give us the jokes in English. Give it to us in Spanish.
We could call Tony O right now if you guys wanted to.
No.
But Patsy's Pizzeria, of course, the brick oven, the famous brick oven pizza, Patsy's. And I think Tony O did tell us a story about Sinatra going in there on, was it Thanksgiving or Easter or something? And they opened the place just for him because...
That I believe.
Yeah.
That I believe.
And it was before he was famous. Like they went in there because he ate there all the time and they opened it up for him for Thanksgiving or something. And he never forgot that because Sinatra is a thing about loyalty. And,
like you, Billy.
Oh, yeah. loyal to a fault.
You've been loyal to all 4 of your wives.
What was it? What, didn't Lasorda say that about Ricky Henderson? He said that he plays like a dog, but a dog is loyal or something like that.
Yeah, Lasorda can't talk.
And you know what? And I found Ricky Henderson. I met Ricky Henderson at an All-Star game. He wasn't even playing. I think he was already retired. As a matter of fact, it was an NBA All-Star game. I had taken my kid. And he was one of the nicest guys you could ever want to meet, Ricky Henderson.
Of course.
What a sweetheart.
He always speaks of himself in the third person.
Does he really?
Yeah. Ricky's here. Ricky's hungry.
I saw him, and I was with my son. He was about 7, and he was all enamored.
Ricky Henderson was about 7?
No, my son was.
Oh.
And he was all about the NBA autographs. So I said to Ricky Henderson, I said, hey, Rick. He was playing with the Yankees, played for the Yankees. And I said, hey, think you give an autograph to a kid from New York? He said, kid from New York? The hell with the autograph. I'll buy him ice cream. Matter of fact, I'll buy his all ice cream. And he bought about 20 kids and bought him ice cream. I said, this guy's just a great guy.
Well, speaking of kids from New York, Glenn Hirsch is with us today. Why don't we give our audience a sampling of Glenn's humor?
New York humor?
Live from Las Vegas, Glenn Hirsch.
I can say this now. I don't like Mexican food. I don't like food that hurts. I didn't know pain could be a flavor. And it's fast-acting stuff, too. After dinner, I spent some time in the men's room in a moving tribute to Mexico. I think I discovered where Ben Gay comes from. We're talking fire in a hole, if you get my drift. As far as I'm concerned, the jalapeno pepper is the pit bull of vegetables. I was raw to wear prescription underwear for a week. Well, I made myself laugh, and I've heard this stuff before. All I remember is looking around the restaurant, people laughing, enjoying each other, enjoying the food. My face, I've never been this hot before in my life. My face felt like it was dripping down the side of my neck. I got the word water out of my mouth as fast as I could. The waitress took this moment in my life to tell me where I'm from, like I needed to know right then and there. I said, hey lady, I need water, water. She came over and looked at me and said, y'all from New York City, ain't you? My teeth are beginning to fuse together. She gives me a speech lesson. It's not whoa, whoa. It's water. Come on, say it with me, water. I had no time to argue with this woman. I said, listen, ma'am, you have a hose out back? Good, then bring me some hose juice.
Oh, Glenn and Sue, hang up that phone.
You got to work on that audio.
Okay, here you go.
There we go.
Hi, Susie. How are you?
I'm gonna hang this phone up, right?
Yes, you can hang up. You can hang
Yes,
up.
you are the better looking one.
You shut this off. Okay.
Glenny,
Now, how do we hear him?
you're on. This is all going to be part of the
You hear
podcast.
me?
Make sure the audio's up.
It's if you can hear us, then we can hear you.
Derek, I can hear you.
All right,
Good.
perfect.
You're on.
I can see you.
All of this is going to be on the podcast because it's fabulous show business work.
Right. Look, let me just tell you guys something. I belong in the 1900s. I was much happier. I'm 20th century man. I was much more comfortable when we just met in the same room. Anyway, here we are.
How you been?
Up till about 5 minutes ago, fine. That's it. I felt like, the anxiety I have, I always feel like I'm letting people down when I'm late. So now I'm letting 3 people down, but I'm good now.
That's my partner Billy O'Connor.
Who I know very well. I watch your podcast, man.
Glenn, very nice of you to say, brother.
And there's Derek
Great
Harris.
having you on,
There's
pal.
Derek Harris over there.
Hello,
Derek, I
hello.
know Derek. I know,
But
and you, the third guy, you're still Frank Pace, right?
I'm still Frank Pace. But let me ask you.
Yes, sir.
Your appearance today was a little in doubt. Can you see our headline right there?
Wait. There's a headline.
Yeah. Can you see?
Oh God. Yeah. Okay. Well, you see, here's the deal. I watched last week's show. And congratulations, guys, on 102 podcasts and only 1 filler. Very good work. Very good. But I saw Christine, and I'm amazed that Billy O'Connor is still part of this show because Christine was great last week. Billy, we've never really met, but I feel like I know you. You're that kind of person. So good to know. And your gun control idea about removing all the security at the Capitol, and then we'd see how fast things would change in terms of laws. Brilliant idea.
Oh, thank you very much, Glenn. I'm a fan of yours as well, man. I've done a lot of research watching your comedy and really enjoyed it, man. Really good.
Well,
Good
thank
stuff.
you very much. Brilliant idea. Brilliant idea. And the thing is that you guys know what my namesake is accused of in New York City.
So you're not the duck sauce killer?
I'm not the duck sauce killer, but I told you there's a story behind it, because a couple weeks ago I received a text in the morning from a woman named Kimberly Richardson that said, "Do you live on 41st Street?" I said, I disregarded it because I thought it was being hacked, so I let it go. 2 hours later, my brother, who lives in Florida, sends me that article about the duck sauce killer, and the first paragraph is Glenn Hirsch, spelled exactly the same way as mine. So there's a connection there, because my whole life people have always left off that second N. And I'm too tall to be a Glenn with only one N. So I see that. There's the connection. I mean, not that I did it, but the connection of Glenn Hirsch arrested for murder. It rings.
You might want to frame that one, Glenn.
Exactly right. So I write back to Kimberly Richardson, who turns out to be an ABC7 news reporter from New York. So I guess I must be the most famous Glenn Hirsch. Now him being the most infamous Glenn Hirsch. And I write back, Kimberly, I just deleted your text because I didn't know who you were, but now I know. And no, I do not live on 141st Street. I live in Los Angeles. She writes me back, well, I took a chance. It was a long shot. I write her back, yes, a very long shot.
That's funny.
But I've gotten emails and texts from friends and comedians who, of course, they think it's hilariously funny. But, it's not fun. It was not fun to be connected. I can't use a credit card in New York City for the next year to eat in a Chinese restaurant.
Christmas for you is ruined.
Yeah, Christmas is ruined. What will I do? No, I'll use cash. I will use cash.
You are a native New Yorker, Glenn, right? Where'd you grow up in New York?
Yes, I grew up in Jackson Heights, Queens. Elmhurst now. I don't know how they switch on.
Yeah.
Billy, where are you?
Oh, I'm a Bronx guy. I grew up in the Bronx. But not too far from Fordham University.
Right. The only connection, well, I have three connections to the Bronx. Valentine Avenue and Fordham Road, there was a girl that a friend of mine and I were interested in, and she, one time when I was like 17 years old, we went over to her house. She speaks of you often,
Glenn. She speaks of you often.
Yes, she does. I don't know how she speaks of me now, because we went to her house, and the girl that my friend was set up with was not interested, and for some reason, we kicked them out of her house. I don't know how it happened. I can't tell you why it happened, but we asked them to leave, and they left us alone. And I hate to admit this 50 years later, but they had a parakeet. She had a parakeet. And my friend was a little inebriated at the time. I guess he had hit the medicine cabinet. In those days, you did anything that wasn't nailed down. So as we're walking out, I said his name, and I said, "Kill the bird." I was just kidding. It's a tragedy. And the next thing, look, now I'm associated with shooting a guy over duck sauce, and now I'm going to be connected to a guy who killed a parakeet. There's something about me and birds.
You can use the duck sauce on the parakeet.
Yeah. Before I could stop him, he opens up the cage, grabs the bird, shakes the bird, and throws it on the ground. That's the silence that I had. And so I can't imagine that this girl remembers me fondly. Anyway,
that's a good story.
That's a good Bronx Valentine's Avenue story.
Billy was in the Yankee Stadium when Maris hit his 61st home run.
Yeah.
Were you really, Billy?
Yeah, I was 12 years old. I think 3 rows behind the guy who caught the ball. Actually,
no.
My picture in the paper, the Daily News. That's why I got a kick out of the Post. Because the Post is like it's become like the Inquirer. I saw your name up there.
You know what? I still read the paper, but I only read the sports section because I grew up on that Post sports section. So I start from the back. and then it just, it gets progressively worse as you turn the pages towards the front page.
What was the post headline when Ike
Yeah.
Turner died?
Yeah, that's funny. When Ike Turner died, the headline from the Post was Ike beats Tina to death. You gotta love that kind of gonzo journalism. I went to school, I swear to Christ, with a guy who worked for the Inquirer, right? The guy worked for the Inquirer, journalism degree. And he says, Billy, he says, when you work for another paper, he says, if somebody calls you up and says you got a talking dog,
Yeah.
you hang up on him. When you work at the Inquirer, the first thing we say is, put the dog on the phone. That's the difference.
It's so freaking funny and so true because my grandmother, I got introduced to the Inquirer because my grandmother, when I was like 8 or 9 years old, she got the Inquirer. So when you're in somebody's house and it says that woman cooks baby in oven, that gets your attention. And that paper, believe it or not, we are friends. Sue and I, my wife and I, are friends with one of the son of the former owner of the Inquirer. He's a lovely, loving man who has pretty much disowned his family because of what the history of that paper and that family are.
Is that David Pecker?
No, not David Peck. He was Trump's guy. He was afterwards. He's after. This is another family.
Oh, I see. Because it's another headline. Jeff Bezos was getting blackmailed by David Pecker, right? That was the deal. And the headline was in the Post, Bezos exposes Pecker. These are great headlines. I mean, they write themselves the jokes.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, that's what they do. I think they have one guy in a room who just sits there and comes up with those kind of headlines. That's his job.
Yep.
And, at this point in time, the Post being what the Post is, news being what news is, it's just a matter of getting eyes on the page. It's just views. So whatever you can put there, there's no difference between that headline today and an Inquirer headline of 10 years ago. Really,
clickbait is the deal.
It's clickbait. Exactly right. Clickbait. It's bullshit.
Do you remember the first laugh you got? The first laugh you got that made you want to become a comedian?
Yeah, the first laugh I got. No, I think, Frank, you and I have talked about that. Maybe you forget, but when I was a kid, I never watched variety shows or, shows like that and saw the comedian and went, that's what I want to do. I love the impressionists. I love those guys. My first laugh was a joke I got in 3rd grade and I got in trouble for it. It was a stupid ass joke that I told and it went around the room and somehow it landed up on the teacher's desk or in front to the teacher and I got blamed for it, but that was the first laugh that I enjoyed getting. So,
do you remember the joke?
Well,
that's a long time ago, man.
No, he remembers it. He just doesn't want to say it.
Forgive me.
I don't really remember the joke, but I remember for a 3rd grader, it was kind of
risque.
Yeah. So, and that's what they took. That's what they had pissed off about, and there was always a reason. Look, as a comedian. I don't think you will become one. I think you are one. That's my point of view. I think that's the way you look at life, and we can get psychological about it and think, your sense of humor saves you from so many things and protects you from so many things, and you make friends that way. And you calm situations down that way. So, I somewhere along the way, whenever there was a class play or a show, I was always one of the guys who was asked to do a monologue. And I don't know why that is. In school, in the 6th grade, I did a monologue in front of all the kids and the parents about being a soldier and being 1 in a million. It was supposedly a comedy monologue, and I was asked to do it. Then I did a couple of monologues and one-person things when I was in camp. I don't know, it always seemed to be that way. But it didn't form on me it didn't come on to me until I was in college, and I was believe it or not, a political science major. I wanted to be, now I look back, I probably wanted to be the first singing, dancing defense attorney. But I was being a lawyer because my father and mother really wanted, when you're a Jew, there's only 2 ways to go. It's a doctor, lawyer in those days. So now you can be doctor, lawyer, and then, comedian, but we'll talk about
Did
that.
Mort Saul influence you at all growing up? I mean, were you a big fan of Mort Saul because political science and his comedy? You know.
No, Billy, I didn't. I wasn't. I only knew more. Again, I wasn't a political guy. I mean, you know, when I was in high school and they had the Vietnam War demonstrations, one day I remember there was a walkout. All the kids walked out of school. I walked out because I'm getting out of school. You know what I mean? I didn't care about in those days, I didn't care about stopping the war. And and my school had 5,000 students in those days. There were 5,000 kids standing on the street. Who does the guidance counselor looking out the window pick out of all those people? Me. His name was Mr. Bongiorno. This is an interesting story. My father, funny, Mr. Bongiorno. So my father, who had been in the World War II and had fought in Italy, and kind of prided himself on the fact that he spoke a little Italian. So he's home that day when they call my house. 5,000 people, I get called. So my father picks up the phone, and all he hears is, Bongiorno here. You know, Mr. Bongiorno saying hello. My father said, Bongiorno to you too. He thought the guy was speaking Italian. So, I mean, but that's it. I was not a political guy. I was in college, Queens College, and I was a political science major, and I never felt comfortable. I always felt like I was studying other people's work. You know, people had come up with those laws and those rules, and they had put them in books, and they were court cases, and I just thought, well, these guys are being creative that way. So one day I'm sitting in the student union at Queens College between classes. My friend comes in and says, Clint, found the class, Easy A. I said, really? He said, yeah. Took me to an acting class. One of the guys, I walked into that classroom, opened the door. I see kids jumping on furniture, banging their head against the wall. And I'm thinking, wait a minute, they're getting credit for this? I do this for nothing. And that's where it changed for me. And I went the next 2.5 years. I was a theater major, and I look back now, I probably should have taken that more seriously. But in that sense, I was able to meet other guys who were funny guys. And we would meet in the mornings and hang out behind the theater. And I don't know if you can still say it. Well, you can say it now. And smoke a little pot to start the day. And we would do sketches and we'd play around. And one day we're doing this. And, you know, that's what college is great for, that kids that were studying film and television walked by to see us doing these sketches, silly sketches that we thought were funny. They thought were funny. And they said, hey, can we videotape you guys? And we thought, sure, why not? So all of a sudden, that little hangout, playing around with guys, who were making each other laugh, was now being videotaped and shown again in the student union on closed circuit television. We started to get a following. It was, you know, I mean, this is the way it started. So one day we're doing our thing, and a guy comes in on a Monday and he says, hey, I just booked this at a comedy club. I said, what? We don't really have an act for that. He said, yeah, we're going to be doing the Metro this Thursday. The Metro is a club in Middle Village on Metropolitan Avenue, where a couple of weeks before I had just seen David Brenner and Andy Kaufman. And I thought that was the most amazing thing to me. I'm watching these guys stand in front of a room full of people, and everybody's paying attention to them, and they're talking, and we're laughing, and it was like hanging out in the corner with my friends. I thought, that's great. So it piqued my curiosity there. And then they set us up at this, he said, we're going to go and do the show. I thought, wow, okay. So we went to my then girlfriend, now wife's house. She had her own place, which was one of the things that most attracted me to her at the beginning. I don't tell anybody. She had her own place. I'd still be living home. My mother hadn't put me out. So we went to our house. We holed up. We wrote a show, and then that week we invited everybody we knew. So that Thursday night we packed the room with people we knew. We went up. We killed because they loved us. They were our friends, and so the guy who owned it, this guy, what's his name?
Mr. Bongiorno.
Yeah, Bongiorno to you too. He said, we love you guys. We want you to come back tomorrow night. So Friday night, we didn't tell anybody. We walked up to an audience of strangers. Whole different world. Whole different world. Nobody knew us. Right. Nobody knew us. Nobody cared about us. Nothing. So we walked up there, and within 15 minutes, the sweat dripping off these other two guys. Billy, you're a fireman. There was not more. There was less water in a hose than there was coming off his back. So all of a sudden, I see these two guys peeling off. They're bailing, and I'm standing on the stage alone. And for some reason, I guess it's survival of the funniest, I just said, I'm not going to give this shit up. This is, So I did about 10 minutes or whatever I might have done, and I got some laughs. So Frank, if you ask, that's probably the first time I got a laugh from a stranger in a situation where it was stand-up. So, and I thought, wow, that's what they must feel like. Andy and David Brennan must feel that way. And
you had the balls to do 10 minutes of improv. I mean, you just belted out 10 minutes.
Well, listen, I was that guy. I would do anything. There was a time, I mean, I was never a guy who sat and wrote golf jokes or mother-in-law jokes. I was always a stream of consciousness kind of guy. And then from that, I developed an act that came, from the things I said on the stage. And then a little bit, when I really got going, after that, a friend of mine took me to the Improv a month later because I started to want to understand more about stand-up, right? So I went, and that night at the improvisation on 44th Street, 9th Avenue, which is, Mecca, comedy Mecca, I saw Freddie Prinze, Jimmy Walker, Richard Lewis, Alan Zweibel, Elaine Boozler, 5 or 6 other guys that became major, comedy voices. And I sat there one after the other. And they only did 15 minutes apiece. And I sat there and watched 8, 9, 10 guys, each guy following the next guy, taking from where that laugh had been left. Not going, I got to be better than that guy. Just moving the room along. I thought, I got to try this. So I started writing down everything that I said or everything I heard or everything I saw that might be funny. It's true, on matchbook covers, on napkins, anything. And then I bought little memo pads. And I always thought if I ever became truly world famous and they wanted the library of Glenn Hirsch Library, it would be little red, blue, yellow memo pads, with the wire at the end. Just, the little memo, the little
Post-its. Yeah, post-its.
Yeah, not even Post-its. Post-its were genius. But that's what I did. So I started writing it down, and then I was graduating, and my girlfriend, my wife now, Sue, she got guys to kick in and bought me a little tape recorder, and I started recording things. And after I graduated college, I started looking around. There were 2 newspapers, Show Business. I think, Frank, you remember Show Business and Backstage. I don't know if you're familiar with them.
Sure.
But they were papers, that would mention auditions. And for me, it was open mic nights or showcases. And I started going, it started in January. I started going every night. I would find a little place I could stand in front of a room full of people. I mean, to the point where I was standing one time, I'm in a basement in Greenwich Village near the Bowery in front of 7 guys who just needed a place to get in from the rain. They were not sitting up; they were sitting in angles in the chair. But I didn't care. I was just standing in front of them. I worked in front of dartboards. I broke up pool games because they just let you work at bars. They weren't on stages; they were just bars, and that was it. You started to get that feeling of what it's like, and I developed. I guess I was looking for 10 minutes because my goal was to audition at the improvisation. And I finally did, and I finally got to that point. And you got me reliving my whole life, Frank, Billy.
That's great.
I got to that point in June of 1975. It's a long time ago. 1975. I was ready, and in those days you had to go up. You had to go on a Monday at about 3:00 in the afternoon, sign up, stand online, get a number, and wait. And I think I was number 7, and out of like 25. And I went up that night, and I had written some pieces. I remember there was speed reading was a big deal then, and I think I had a bit about speed living, and I would do a whole bit about what it would be like in 20 years. Can you imagine? 25 years. I mean, and then I did a thing about the Pope. They were fun. I don't work. I ended up not working at all like that, but I wrote those pieces specifically for the audition, and I auditioned, and the manager of the club, Bud Friedman, was in LA at the time. He was looking to move out here, and so he wasn't there for the audition night. But Judy Orbach, who was the manager and pretty much ran the club, she was running the night, and she said, "Look, we love you. We'd like you to come back the next night." I did, and because Bud wants to see you. I went on that night. Bud saw me and he said, "Okay, we'd love you to be a regular." I thought, I walked out of that club down 44th Street thinking, okay, I guess got accepted at the Improv. I think I'll do the Tonight Show in about 6 months. So maybe I'll have a television. I mean, I was so freaking naive.
Did Bud have his monocle?
Bud had his monocle. Bud always has his monocle. You know, he's 90-something years old now. His birthday was 2 weeks ago. But he invited me back. And then at that time, Chris Albrecht, I think you know the name, Frank. Chris Albrecht.
Albrecht was the president of HBO.
Right. And that was
up until 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
But he was probably the doorman there at that time, correct?
He was a comedy. He was a team. It was him and Bob Zmuda. Maybe you know the name Bob Zmuda, who was Andy Kaufman's right-hand man and writer. And he ended up doing Tony Clifton after Andy passed away. But Chris and Zmuda were partners. Chris was just pretty much, he wasn't even managing. He was just there, but he had inherited some money. And Bud was looking to move to California and wanted partnership. So Chris was, I'd say, 23 years old at the time, became the part owner of the improvisation. So he along with Bud, accepted me. And when you're being accepted to the Improv, as I've learned 40 years later, it only meant that I was able to hang out, never go on, hang out till 2 o'clock in the morning, and then go on for the same 3 guys who were looking to get out of the ring.
But you became the house MC at the Improv, is that correct?
Well, yeah, that comes late. This is amazing to me. I mean, this is how these steps come. I never worked really hard, guys. I regret that I could say that now. Things just came at me and I had to learn. I should have worked harder in certain areas. If you want to get down to that, we'll talk later. But yeah, I became a house MC, and I also became the man who ran the audition night. A year later, I'm running the night that I'm talking about.
Who was on the card that first night you were appearing as a regular at the Improv? Okay,
again, Andy Kaufman, Freddie Prinze, Jimmy Walker, Alan Zweibel became a major comedy writer. Elaine Boozler, Richard Lewis, Bob Shaw. So funny human beings.
They were all there the first time you.
Yeah,
they were still there.
Well, because comedy in those days, there were only 2 clubs, and they weren't the clubs that we had. So these people were just hoping to get hired to do a job. I mean, Prinze and Walker were just about to get, discovered and moved to LA. They were there. It might have happened within the first 3 weeks I was accepted at the Improv. But the major guys were Lewis and Elaine and Shaw. These people were, they were the go-to guys at the time. They got all the time.
Did Richard Lewis work with notes even then, back then?
Richard Lewis, no.
Because he worked with notes at Carnegie Hall. He did a Carnegie Hall office show with notes.
I've often told Richard I don't understand why he did that. He was always trying things out, and he was a funny human being. Good-looking guy, funny guy, but he didn't use notes. No, he would go up on stage with, never lost that anxiety he had, but he did not use notes in those days. But those were the people that were who were the anchors of the shows. We young comedians we hung out, and while you hung out, and those shows in those days went till 3 o'clock, almost 4 o'clock in the morning. It's crazy to say right now, because I think shows are over by 11 these days.
Yeah.
I was able to figure out. Well, I'll go in. I'll show up at the Improv. I would leave my house at 12 o'clock at night to get to the Improv just to show my face. And then I would try to find other places I could work to. Or I'd go somewhere else, a couple of places before, I went there to hang out. Because when you're accepted at the Improv, you had to show up. Just had to put in your time. And then eventually, maybe, down the line, 6 months, 8 months, a year later, one of those major people got a gig, or one of them couldn't show up, and they looked in the bar. Bud would come into the bar, or Chris would come into the bar, or Judy would come into the bar and go, Glenn, you're on. And you had to be, it's like a bullpen pitcher. You know what I mean? You're up. And you go on the stage, and you worked your way down. Or in terms of the club, you worked your way to better times. 1 o'clock, 12:30, 11:30, 10, 9, 8, till the weekend. And then I was lucky. I was working, I was still in college, and I was just about to be, I wasn't still in college, just to finish college, but I had a part-time job at Barney's on 17th Street and 7th Avenue. You guys know Barney's.
Sure.
You all need clothes. You all need clothes. I was working there from 6 to 9:30, and then I would go out to clubs, or I'd go to the Improv. And within, 9, 10 months, I guess I was one of the, sounds strange, physically bigger comedians. So they asked me to work the door, right? And by working the door, it meant answering the phones and possibly bouncing, which is very funny. And, if somebody tried to beat a check, which was a 2-drink minimum and $3.50 to get in at that time. And so I was working the door. I was offered that job, and it also paid like $25 a night. So I was able to quit my job at Barney's, where I was no longer working. I was pretty much the USO at Barney's, just keeping the troops happy. I didn't sell anything. I would find myself hiding in one of our rooms back in the back, just to get away from people. I mean, so they kept me around. I don't know why they kept me around, but honestly, I don't think I've ever really quit Barney's. I just didn't show up one day.
They're still looking for you.
Yeah, I should give them a call. So I started working at the Improv, and then about a few months later, they asked me to start emceeing the shows, which was, again, a big, big deal. Oh, Larry David had just come in, too. He's a friend of Richard Lewis. So he was there. We met there. We hung out. And so I emceed the shows, and then I started running audition night, which was Sunday night. It used to be Monday, then it became Sunday night, and it became a big deal. And I don't want to say that I'm one of the foundations of studying the comedy scene in America, but I invited, through audition night, Paul Reiser, Keenan Wayans, Bob Wall, Gilbert Gottfried, Rita Redner, Bob Townsend. I mean, a bunch of people that I saw that were very funny to me. I invited Jerry Seinfeld because the comic strip had opened up. The history of comedy in America is fascinating because it all came from, a 1 mile radius. Comedy store out here, and the Improv, Catch a Rising Star, and the comic strip, which was on 82nd and 2nd. So there were maybe 25 young comedians at the time. So we had to run and sit.
Was Dangerfield's in that mix also, or
Dangerfield came later. And it's funny because I lived on 58th and 1st, and Dangerfield was on 61st and 1st. And I worked there a few times, but it came a little later where they started to realize that, because Rodney was hiring name acts at the time, Rodney, whoever, all his friends, I think Mort Saul, guys like that. It was a nightclub. And then they realized that they can make more money if they made it a showcase club. And then they started hiring guys on the weekends, and that came later. But yeah, it was in the mix later on. Not for me so much, but the Improv was number one. Then Catch a Rising Star, and the difference between Catch a Rising Star and the Improv was that Catch seemed more Las Vegas, more showbiz. So you worked your wares over at the Improv, and then went across town to Catch once you felt you had something to sell. And Catch was, it was a connected club in some ways. So that's a whole other story. But that, and then the way the comic strip opened up, again, this is all like 75, 76, 77. Comic strip opened up because Richie Tinkin and his partner John were they were bar owners in the Bronx, Billy, in the Bronx. And they went to Catch a Rising Star one night to see comedy, and they're waiting in the bar. And in those days, you know, you had to grease the freaking bouncer at the door to get a table because that's how busy it was. And they were waiting, and they kept watching people walk in, getting tables before them. And finally, Richie walked up to one of the guys at the door and said, "Listen, we've been waiting for a while, you know, I mean, what's the deal? You know, we watch people walking in." And he said, "Look," this guy said to him, "It's Change Comedy." The guy said to him, "Look, we have all the customers we need." Billy, Richie, and John heard that as bar owners. They walked out of the club, walked around down to 82nd Street, looking for a store. They found the first store that was open. They bought it. They turned it into the comic strip. The comic strip is still the only club that's still around in that neighborhood.
Amazing.
That's great.
That's any store. Just another place for people to work, and that's where Seinfeld started. That's where Larry Miller started. Chris Rock. Those guys came out of that club, and we all worked together. We became friends. Then we played in the Broadway Show League. It was a lifestyle that just, you know, you lived and slept and talked and worked comedy, hung out with comics. You talked comedy. You lived comedy. Then you did comedy. Guys helped each other. They sit in the back of the room. These days, I don't know how kids get started, but they sit in the back of the room and they go, "Glenn, you know that bit you did? You should add this." That don't happen anymore. So that's where I got started. So have I answered your question? Good night, guys. I got to take a 9-hour nap.
You answered that question.
All this from hello?
all this from hello. So you went on to, you've opened for some of the biggest acts in show business.
Again, by accident. I was never looking for it.
But,
I just,
you know, I mean, I saw you when you were opening for Dolly Parton. I mean,
Right.
How do you go about opening for Celine Dion or Dolly Parton or Kenny Loggins or Barry Manilow or the Temptations or Frankie Valli or George Benson? I'm not done. George Benson, Jeffrey Osborne, to name a few.
Call me when you need me.
We ever intimidated opening for them?
No, I wasn't. I'll tell you a couple stories, but how that happened, though, just emceeing on the stage at the Improv. I was working, and it seemed one night Barry Manilow's manager, Miles Laurie, was in the audience. And I didn't know this. I just went on stage, did my thing, and when you're with the MC, your job is to open the show, warm up the crowd, and then bring on the acts. And in between each act, I was able to do 3, 4, 5 minutes. Later on, it became 10 minutes, and people started to hate me. But because you want the stage time. So I was doing my thing, and I guess the next day, Miles Laurie had seen me, liked me, called Chris. Chris told me, call this guy. He called. He said, "We're looking. I like you very much. Do you have management?" I said, "What do you mean?"
Sue.
Well, that was, she was away though, because I was freelancing. But I did. I had a manager, but I hadn't called to quit at Barney's yet, so I didn't want to talk to him. So I said, "No, I don't." He said, "Well, why don't you come over to my house?" We lived on 72nd and Riverside, unfreaking believable townhouse. Right. So I never seen anything like it. So I walk in and I met him, and later on I find out that Miles Laurie was a big, big deal, at the time. I mean, it had a lot to do with Woodstock also. I learned that history too, but I didn't know any of that. So we talked, and he was Barry Manilow's manager, and at that time Manilow was the biggest star on the planet. So he said, "I'd like to manage you, and we're also looking for an opening act for Barry, who's opening at Resorts International in Atlantic City." And Atlantic City was just getting started. So all of a sudden, I'm going from I signed with him, I'm making $100 a week to $5,000 a week in 1975, guys. Yeah. 1978. Wow. 78. And from that, I got the William Morris Agency, and then I left the William Morris Agency to go to ICM. And from ICM, they took a liking and they started putting me with all these people. And it was remarkable. I mean, I was able to work with all different kinds of audiences, country audiences, R&B audiences, white crowds, I mean, young crowds, older crowds, certain ones. I would work in the circle and the round. I stages in the round. I work everywhere. You get such experience doing that. So I was doing that, I did not focus on anything else but doing that for the longest time. And did I get intimidated, Frank? Billy, no, not by the people. I mean, I spent months with Frankie Valli the 4 seasons. I would drive places with Frankie. It was exciting to me to think that in high school I was listening to his music. Now I'm in a car with the guy. And sometimes it would get tough because his audiences or their audiences, the star's audiences, are there to see the star. Some crowds don't want anything, as I learned, don't want any other act before that act they're there to see or paid money to see. I used to kid people when I was working with Dolly. I walk out in front of 5,000 people. I go, wow, between Dolly and myself, we packed this place. I'm sorry, Billy. Yeah.
No, Glenn, I just want to ask you a question as a comic.
Sure.
No
questions. What? You in New York Post?
Yeah. When you're there's an old adage when you play golf. Every gambling bet that's ever been made in golf is won and lost on the first tee. My impression as a fledgling comic is that you have to read the audience before you get out on stage, and you got to know the audience that you're performing to and adjust accordingly. Right? Is that right? Would you say that's?
In some ways, it is because you know what? You're right. Audiences have their own personality. I used to stand behind the curtain when we had curtains to stand behind, and I'd listen to the murmur. You know what I mean? The energy of the crowd.
Right.
You could tell. Sometimes you'd go, and after a while, I was able to read it as better and better. I would think, "Oh, this audience sounds tired." Wow, look at the juice coming out of that audience. So,
Yeah, when you got like Dolly Parton you're opening for, the Temptations, those are two totally different audiences.
Totally different crowds, right? So and in different situations, right? You're right. So you got to know what you're dealing with in that sense, how old they are. You take all those things into consideration. But I mean, I thought when I started working with Kenny Loggins, and that was fun because I loved his music and I was a fan. So we worked there, but those guys, his people were rabid people. I'll never. One of the toughest nights I ever had in my life was at the Fox Theater in Memphis, Tennessee. I walk out, and this is a theater that held like 4,000 people with, orchestra and then balcony. And so I walk out on stage, I say hello, start doing my thing, and I start hearing, Kenny, they're chanting, Kenny, get off, they're yelling, I'm fighting. It's exhausting, it's me against 4,000 people. And it was exhausting for 15 minutes. I walk off the stage, I'm in my dressing room thinking, what the hell was that? And I'm thinking, yeah, well, why not? And this was in Memphis, right? So I'm thinking to myself, wait a minute. Elvis died in Memphis. Martin Luther King died in Memphis. Why shouldn't Glenn Hirsch die in Memphis? I laugh about it now, guys, but then it was a nightmare. In that sense, but when it was right, I mean, there were times I'd walk up the stage because it was a manufactured audience for me. When Dolly or George Benson or Frankie Valli would bring Dionne Warwick, whoever it might be, would bring their crowds, and I worked them, and they liked me. You walk off on a high. It's just amazing. I remember walking back to the hotel one time thinking, what the hell? Wow, that was unbelievable. And you slept better, you ate better. It's that old adage, Billy, you're only as good as your last show. In some ways, that was true. In some ways, I learned that you fight through that and don't make it that way, because it's not something that defines you as a human being. That there are so many different things you have to take you have to think about in terms of, like you say, the audience's condition. Friday night shows at a club, the first show was okay, second show was a nightmare because people had worked all week and they go out and they get wasted. And there's nothing worse than trying to work to an audience that's, full of alcohol. That's where
Second
that's where
show
the
on a Friday night. On the second show on a
second
Friday
show, and then we got so busy, they used to do 3 shows. So 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, you're doing a show to people who don't want to go home yet. And, it's like doing a show at an after-hours club. It was tough. But you knew that. And then some of the shows, and the third shows sometimes were done because the bartenders and waitresses at other clubs wanted to come see a show. But it was still tough on the performer. So you learn those things. And yes, you're right, you have to read the audience and know the audience and know the times that you're working. And
Did you have a set retinue of responses for hecklers, ready-made responses for hecklers?
Yeah, I did. They developed after a while. You start doing. I think they were young, as they were young comedians. They were young hecklers that were working their craft. I should think that freaking guys follow me all over the country. You come up with things, and I would tend to just trust my sense of humor, and I hit back whatever might have been said, or I deal with something. But I think the most favorite line I ever said after a while, this guy was going, I was going, boom, boom, boom. And then I just stopped and I looked at him and I said, you know what? It's people like you that make people like me become people like you.
Perfect.
And that was it. But I stopped, and I mean, that one became a go-to after a while. But no, do I like it? Did I look for it? No. And I didn't get that many, but you get it.
Yeah, but you were ready for them, and just in case they come. I mean, that's the first thing. When I first got on stage at 63, I think was the first time I tried to do stand-up. And I said, fuck it. I've been making a fool of myself all my life. Why not get on stage and give it a shot, right?
Well, that's how I felt. Get paid for it, man. Banging your head against the
wall. The first thing you're thinking is, what if I get heckled and you want to have a couple of lines that you can level a guy with, because you're
yeah.
But I very rarely got hecklers, but of course, not to the I didn't have anywhere near. I didn't do anything like you've done. You've accomplished. Do you find it's easier to do with a full comedy crowd, say 600 people, than to try and do the 5 and 6, breaking up a pool room? I mean, that's breaking up a pool game. It's so much easier, right? I mean, it's.
Oh, absolutely. For me, it was. When the crowd is there for comedy and it's a good crowd. By the way, just to go back to a point, the worst hecklers of all times are women. Women hecklers, the worst, because you got to know how to deal with them. So alcohol and women and bachelorette parties.
Bachelorette parties, I was about to say it, the worst.
A nightmare, because they're there to entertain themselves. You know what I mean?
They want to make it about themselves.
That's right. So you learn that. You learn that too. But for me, working an audience, because as you can tell, guys, it takes me 15 minutes to say hello. So 6 minutes was always tough for me. Television sets were always tough. Guys who could do it fascinated me. Seinfeld and guys like that who had it all broken. Rodney was brilliant. I mean, Rodney Dangerfield, every word was worked out. Nobody's
looking at your comedy, and Glenn, correct me if I'm wrong here. I mean, I was looking at your comedy, and it seems to me you could take, like, you do a bit, and your bit maybe a minute and a half, 2 minutes. It could have been a 10-minute bit or a 15-minute bit, but you got to compress down to a minute and a half over the years to make it funnier and sharper and hit funnier. I mean, could you take a 45-minute set and make it an hour and a half if you wanted to? I mean, out of the same story.
Well, look, I tell people over the 1975 to 22. That's 47 years. I have 2.5 hours worth of material. So if you break it down, it sounds like a lot of material, a lot of shows. But I've only been creative 3 minutes a year for the last 40 years. So, yes, I did a lot of stuff off the cuff too. Stuff that you can't do on a 6-minute set on television or in an audition. You got to be really succinct and know your stuff. So, yeah, I could, and I did. And what happens to me, my kind of comedy, I wrote bits, I wrote pieces, and I started traveling. And I go, oh, God, I can put that there. If something new came up, that there. So bits that I did were longer in a sense, and they grew longer. Yeah, I could.
And you pretty much were clean, right?
For the longest time. Bud Friedman said, you can only do on my stage what you can do on television. Who knew what television would become?
Yeah,
wow,
for sure.
But that was the deal. So Yeah, you worked clean. And, you know, I got yelled at one time for using the word bastard on the stage in front of Dionne Warwick. Guy came back, the owner of the theater in Pennsylvania, Valley Forge, and raging. You'll never work here again. It was unbelievable. And all I did was say the word bastard. And not calling anybody bastard, but it was some joke that I did. I can't even tell you what it was, but I mean, that's how it became. And now, if you don't get dirty, then now they have X-rated nights, blue nights, you know, naked nights, you know, whatever.
But you still tell a young comic to work clean, because you really, if you don't work clean, you don't work. I mean,
well, that's the beauty of, yeah, right. I agree, because I want it to be fun for the whole family. You know, you're not going to get too many 7-year-olds, but later on in life, when I started to do some cruise ships,
right,
because that was the mainstay of, it was like Las Vegas on the water. They were paying lots of dough, and you were working 4 times, and I developed an eating disorder. I can't stop eating disorder from.
I think you said you love doing cruise ships. The only thing you're concerned about was you thought the rooms came with all the same clothes.
Yes, I didn't have to shop. Right, I didn't want to bring any clothing. I thought they gave you clothes, and you just showed up. Little did I know, you know.
And he said the same thing about the audience, because the audience, you said, was all dressed in the same thing every time, every cruise you made.
Same crowd. Same people. You see, Billy, I'm telling you, it's the same thing with cruise ships in that sense. They all become somewhat the same. Cruise ship people that like to cruise. They you know, and I'm just the entertainers are just a part of the buffet. Oh, look, roast beef, potatoes, comedy. That's what it was. It was just a part of the buffet.
Now, on the cruise ships, you do the first show clean, is that right? And then you can get a little blue in the later night?
No, that's now.
Okay.
That's now. When I started doing them, you know, on the Nina, the Pinta, I think I worked the Santa Maria.
Good buffet on the Santa Maria, right?
I never got to the Mayflower because I was doing Telegraph by then.
By the way, if you ever work the Santa Maria again, try the Salt Tech.
Bonjour.
I will remember. But no, in those days, my God, you could not say. You had to be so clean. It was like working the Lawrence Welk show, I'm sure, or a Sunday morning church service. It really was. And I was a unique individual because I was clean, but I was free. I was, you know, a New York guy. In those days, I was a New York kid. I didn't give a shit about working there again. So when you don't care and you just get laughs and you're clean,
yeah,
it's the best way to be. Because if I never worked again, I didn't care. I had all the jobs I needed, all the work I needed. I was just doing it because it was new.
I'm going to stop you because I know you've got a 2:00 appointment. So if we got to go, because I'm not going to incur the wrath of Sugiosa.
No, you don't want that. You don't want that.
Because I'm scared of Sugiosa. I've always been scared of Sugiosa, and you're scared of Sugiosa.
Frank, you got to keep your voice down. You got to be quiet, Frank. Billy, calm him down. Billy, you can't.
Calm him down.
So you have to give us a 10-minute notice before you have to go, or else we'll go forever.
Well, I know. I got a 10-minute notice here. Frank, Billy, I'm sorry.
Well, no. I'm going to ask you, do you remember the first time? Quick answers. Do you remember the first time we met?
Well, it had to do with Jay Thomas, I'm sure, right?
Right.
And refresh, Frank, because I feel like I know you my whole life. So
well, we were at Jay Thomas's Malibu mansion when he was doing Mork and Mindy, and Jay's mutual friend Joe Piscopo was making his debut on Saturday Night Live.
That's right.
So we all went over to see that.
That's right. Oh God, Jay, Frank. Well, you know, nobody's closer to Jay than you, Frank. And Jay was one of the funniest human beings and sweetest guys on the planet. And you know, he talk about always being on when he was with his friends. He was never a dull moment. That guy was a party in a shirt. He was.
Well,
It's a nice thing to have.
You should watch our podcast with his son, JT Harding.
Yeah, you told me I'm going to.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? I watched some of it because I wanted to see. You said that JT was, pretty close to what Jay looked like, and yes, you're right. And my daughter is as well as my wife being an actress and
Zoe Hirsch.
Yeah, Zoe Giosa. Joey Nicole is her name. She's a songwriter, and she's doing great stuff. So JT doing what he does. I'm interested in all that stuff now. But yeah, I'm going to watch the whole thing. But I watch your podcast. You guys are terrific, and I love listening, and I learn. And you guys, you hit on all aspects of life, really. Entertainers, athletes, business people,
astronauts.
Astronauts.
What a nice compliment. That's so nice to hear from you.
Well,
man.
thank
That's
you.
a really nice compliment.
Can you
Thank
tell me the derivation of the name Glebe Hush?
Oh God, we don't have 5 minutes. Well, I was doing a show, and I did a show for older people, and one of the older women was the MC of the show. I don't know where it was. It's some club that they were holding a party, or I don't think it was assisted living, but it was one of those older. It was an older situation, and I do my thing. I say goodnight. Woman walks out as they're applauding and leans over and whispers in my ear, "What's your name again?" She forgot my name, and so I said Glenn Hirsch. And so I specifically remember saying Glenn Hirsch because that's the name I had memorized. And
one N or two?
2 N's. I didn't mention that. It didn't matter because life became a living hell because of that N. So, and now I'm convicted. And now I'm arrested for murder. So I said Glenn Hirsch, and she said great. And I'm standing there as they're applauding. She goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, let's have another big round of applause for Mr. Glebe Hush." What can you say? No, she's wrong. I didn't want her. So I didn't want her to be embarrassed. So I walked off, and then I tell the story. And I never had a nickname as a kid, but I now have the silliest nickname I've given myself. I get mail, Glebe Hush, or email, Glebe Hush, and it sticks. It stuck, and it's a funny story that I tell. And again, comedy came out of it.
Before we go, Derek, you got any questions? Billy, any final thoughts?
I'd like to have that as an epitaph when he said about Jay Thomas. I'd like that party. He was a party in a shirt. I'll take that right on my gravestone right now, man. That's a hell of an epitaph.
Billy, I've watched you a little bit. You are now a party in a shirt and a hat.
New York cab driver. Personifies a New York cab driver. That's for sure.
Hero, man.
You don't even cut without a hat on, Frank,
Glenn, go to your matinee.
Frank, thank you for everything, and keep up the good work as good as you are in your
Honey,
business.
we're going to be late.
Oh, we're going to be late.
Thank you, Glenn, for coming on, man.
Thank you, Sue. Thank you, Sue.
All right, love you guys. Hope it worked out. Don't edit this too much.
No. All right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to have picked his brain a little bit more. He was really a fascinating guest, man. Just the guys he's worked with and how long he's been at it. You learn a lot from a guy like that.
Of course, it's typical. We couldn't start early enough because Sue was having an acting class. She's a terrific actor, coach, and director, and all of those things. But we couldn't start early enough because she had a class, which makes sense. And then we had to cut off a little bit sooner than I would have liked because he had to attend a play. That's Sue, one of Sue's students.
One of her students
was acting. Yeah. It was a big play too. So
yeah, you wonder about some guys have great standby lines for. He was talking about, and I know this because when I used to do comedy in Phoenix, I'd be at the House of Comedy. It's Friday night, late night, you get the drunks, and of course you get the grief. But when you had a bachelorette party, it was an automatic. Look, we're here. We're with the same girls. We're all having a great time. We're all drunk, and let's make us. It's all about us, So I used to do an opening bit. I'd say to her, "Hey, the bachelorette party," and I'd find out the bride's name, Marie, whatever. And I'd say, "Marie, I got some good news and some bad news. The good news is the girls got together. They hired you a stripper. The bad news is the stripper's me. And they'll hope you like bald heads and baggy balls because that's what I'm bringing, But you had to get them involved. Otherwise, you're dead because they break your balls. And some lines, the classic lines, I saw this guy, Jimmy Schubert, really good comic, been at it forever. Worked the door at the Comedy Store in L.A. That's how he got started. And one of the best lines, two guys are talking in the front. You try to do comedy, and two guys are talking. And Schubert looks down and says, "Hey, where'd you learn how to whisper in a helicopter?" Just great one-liners, and it shuts people up.
Yep.
You got to have that.
Yep.
All those years, you must have a million of them.
Well, he's been a good friend for a long time, and I'm glad. Well, today was another good day.
Yeah, man, it was a good day.
Derek, you wanted to ask?
Yeah, I got a question for you guys. I want to ask you guys, if you could have dinner with two people that are not in your family members, they could be dead or alive, and who would those people be, and what would the subject matter be for dinner?
Well, I'd have to say Mark Twain would be one of them. That's for sure.
Okay, so
And I
that's
guess the
easy, but
subject
now,
would be journalism and how he, I think Mark.
but you got to pick another person.
Yeah, I know. That's interesting. Mark Twain. Who else? Frank, you got any thoughts on the two guys you would pick?
Mark Twain, Don Rickles, and Jay Thomas.
Why? Two of your friends, two guys you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why would I want to have dinner with
Somebody I didn't know.
somebody I didn't know?
What would you guys talk about?
I would just let it happen.
Or like subject matter?
I would just let it happen. Wherever it would be like this interview, wherever it went, I would just like to see where it went.
Yeah, I think that seems to be the best. When you're preparing for these interviews, you do the research and everything. But the first thing I'm thinking is, right, that's the guy's Wikipedia. You can get that information. I want to know things that where the conversation just flows. You just go off and say, "Yeah, having a conversation." For Christ's sake.
It's like interviews.
Yeah.
Just like to see where it went.
Yeah, Mark Twain for sure. He would be the number one guy. I guess.
Because you said families excluded, so if families were not excluded, my mother and father.
Yeah, well, that's.
I don't know if I'd like to talk to my old man again. I didn't like to talk to him when he was alive.
Well, good things, because you won't have to.
He's on it. He's on it.
That's the end of this show. So see you later for next week. See you later
week. See you later for next week is right. And thanks for tuning in next week.
Every once in a while, I go.
Thanks for tuning in again. It's
Thank you,
a
Derek.
pleasure to have you.
Thank you, guys.
Next week's guest, actor in Boy Meets World, Bosch, and Animal Kingdom, William Russ.
We'll see you next week.